Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of A Journey in Boots from Trauma to Triumph. I'm your co-host, Dorothy Odell. Normally, you would see the amazing Dr. Jay Royster on the other side of me. However, she is in Ohio this week with family. So keep her and her family in your prayers, if you would, please. But tonight, for our amazing co-host, we have Ryan. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, because you're brand new, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
I absolutely love that question. Sometimes I can't figure out what to say. But anyways, I'm going to go with the Kerry says. I'm an Afghanistan war veteran. There we go. We'll start out with that. Did 10 years in the Oregon National Guard as full-time, then got out in 2018. And then after that, started my own business doing pressure washing, did that for 5 years. And then after that, my wife and I decided to sell our house, get in an RV, and travel the United States. And now we're currently in Texas. So.
Texas? What part of Texas?
Texas.
I love Texas.
North of Houston in Conroe.
Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service. We're going to have you come back on so you can share your full story. But tonight, we have our mutual friend and amazing guy. Kerry is a Gulf War veteran, and welcome to the show. And he's also Mr. Yoga Master. So welcome to the show. Anybody that really wants to know anything about yoga, he's your guy. So welcome, Kerry. I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to share. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Kerry has an amazing presentation. I don't know if you've got that ready. He's normally we do things a little bit differently, but Kerry is a different guy. And so Kerry has this amazing presentation. So we'll just go with it and we'll go from there.
You can see my screen?
There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory through this, my journey, and how I ended up here today. Of course, this can be an open dialogue if you guys want to pause and ask, or if you want to wait to the end to ask me questions, then feel free to do whatever you're comfortable with. You'll probably get some of the answers or the questions answered during this presentation. But this is my wife and I. We've been married since '91. And I've always talked about the hero's journey and talked about the opportunity to become the hero of your own story and no longer the victim or a warrior. But what I've realized is it's challenging for people to resonate with that. So last year in November, I decided that going forward, I'm going to relabel it as a producer, and that we have the opportunity to create the script, the life that we really desire, to rewrite the script from our past and become more present and become the best versions of ourselves. So my first introspective question for you guys and anybody watching in the future are you a producer of your own growth rather than a victim of your circumstances? Because we've all gone through circumstances that were unfortunately inconvenient, unforeseen, and extremely challenging in our life. Mm-hmm. This is in Coronado Beach. So if you've ever been out by San Diego, this is the Veterans Cemetery out there. And during our session this evening, on average, there'll be 2 veterans that commit suicide during the time. So I just want you to put that label in the back of your head and realize that, the time that we have is precious, and the opportunity to help save and transform lives is my number one objective. So who am I? Yeah, I'm Kerry Steuart. I'm a Gulf War veteran. I'm also a husband and a father and a grandfather and a grandson. And I absolutely love this photo. So right after I was born, serendipitously, my wife and I lived right across from Tinker Air Force Base. I went off to Germany. My dad was in the Vietnam War, and his twin brother. And then my wife stayed, of course, in Midwest City. Then eventually we ended up back in the same neighborhood in junior high, which is ironic that we lived together or close together at a very young age, didn't even know it. This was taken in Germany. My dad was stationed over there, and we lived above a pizza restaurant, and this is me eating some spaghetti over there. After the Vietnam War, my parents got divorced, and I'd spent a lot of time with my dad and a lot of time with my mom separately. And from trauma from the war, my dad turned to alcohol. That was a coping mechanism for my dad. It was alcohol and drugs and, occasionally sex. But I didn't like who he was becoming when he drank. And so a lot of times I would take this beer, like when I could, away from him because he wasn't the same man when he began to drink. And that's prevalently a case for a lot of us. We don't know how to deal with our trauma. We don't know how to deal with our stress. We don't know how to deal with the anxiety. We don't know how to deal with all these things in our life. And we turn to substances and other obstacles in our life that are avoiding mechanism. And we become somebody we don't like. We become somebody that people don't want to be around us, even though they do love and care for us. And I think that's a challenge for so many people that go to war or face trauma or face a lot of mortality and death, that this is a stigma with them. And you look back at the Vietnam War, and a lot of those people did not agree with it. And I mean, even people like Jane Fonda, they said that all these veterans are war criminals. And so there was a lot of negativity around it. And so there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame that he carried for years. My family is really tight. They're on my dad's side, they're from Woodward, Oklahoma. And this is my oldest cousin, Micah. And I'd spent a lot of time in Woodward. I went to school there. I spent my summers there. And we just had an amazing time. And with the foundation of being from small town Oklahoma, and the time spent there was extremely pivotal. My grandma and grandpa went through the Depression. And after the Depression, of course, there's the Dust Bowls. And then after that, a tornado came through and wiped out the entire town. So they went through some very traumatic times that the last 100 generations have never seen. Never had to struggle and suffer to that level as an entire country. And I just really enjoyed the conversations with these relatives and these people that lived through these really unforeseen circumstances, but came out the other side as the producer of their life. And this is me in Tulsa, and I was always kind of like in a little rebel. This was a great flood, they call it, of Tulsa in the late 80s. And you weren't supposed to go in this area, but we parked a little spot and hopped over the police barrier, and I went over to take a photo, So I think that's always been in me, that little bit of rebel and the opportunity just to question why. And it's like, hey, you know what? I'll be safe. I'll be secure. I'll take care of myself. I'm not going to harm myself or anybody, but I want to adventure out. I want to see things in life. I want to just feel again and see things and do things, to me, spectacular. This was actually taken really close. This is in Knoll, Missouri in high school. This is just one of my favorite photos.
Look at that hair.
Yeah, the mullet. So after high school, my wife and I got married, and I joined the Air Force. And we take this oath that we're going to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And this is very vital to this conversation this evening. This is a RC-135. So my first assignment after training was in Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. And these are reconnaissance aircraft. And so they're analyzing every signal that's out there, anything that transmits. So we fly in a figure eight, you could call it an infinity symbol, and we're monitoring SAM sites. We know how much water's in a water tower. We know every signal that's being broadcast. We analyze it and we record it. And so we're tracking cell phone data or anything that's a satellite phone, anything satellite, television, anything. You think of any frequency that's transmitted, we're observing it, we're recording it, and we're analyzing it. And this is how we, can track down the enemy. We can track down their tanks or any other defense mechanisms out there. We're able to see and know exactly who's out there, what's out there, and if it's relocated and when it is. One thing that's really neat about the rivet joint and the AWACS is that there's always one in the air. There's always an AWACS flying, and there's always a rivet joint in the air. There's not one time since probably 80s or 90s that one of these aircraft have not been in the air, monitoring and ready for surveillance. The AWACS from their antenna can monitor basically everything on the side of the globe. It's really amazing. To go back in the 90s, we had touch screen systems. So this is like a Linux-based system. And I remember the first CD recorder that we had, and I don't remember what year it was, but it was when they first came out. It weighed 90 pounds. It was a 2-man lift, and it cost $90,000 to record because we were using tapes. One of the things that we had back then was touchscreen technology to route and to analyze. And it's the same technology now that we use in our cell phones and other touchpads. So a lot of this technology that you're seeing today was predominantly from Air Force technology. This is me and Riyadh, and looking back at this time, it was really cool seeing a lot of these places that I visited, and a lot of places people were at, of course, Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Norman. This is when the trauma was started. This is in a place, and if you look back there, it's really hard to tell from this photo, but those are the SAM sites. There's AWACS, the rivet joint, and a bunch of fighter aircraft out there, F-16s. And so our job was to track down, right, and to defend those terrorists, foreign and domestic. And so our mission was to eliminate terrorists. And so we would follow terrorists and we would try to eliminate them. Unfortunately, during this time, we didn't eliminate a lot of the terrorists, but their allies. And we eliminated a lot of innocent lives during this time. And because of that, it created a lot of trauma because, we're killing women and children that have nothing to do with the war. They're just innocent bystanders. And I would go home at night and just, realize that, I'm so thankful of where my family lives because they're not having to deal with this trauma. Their life isn't at risk like all the lives that we're taking each and every day. So this was the foundation of the trauma, the chaos for me in my life, and the guilt and the shame that I still carry today of all the innocent lives that we took during the war. After Offutt, I was stationed in Korea. So over here to my left is Greg Bicknell, and to my right is Jeff Caldwell and Troy McDonald. So the guys to my left and right, I still stay in contact with. I've lost touch with Troy, but in Korea, I had a very blessed opportunity. I did the security briefing for the president. So I would take all the information from all the missions every single day. I would type it up in an email, and then I would send it over to my buddy Jeff, and he would encrypt it. He would send it over to the Pentagon, and then the Pentagon would send it over to the White House, and the White House would print it out and hand it to the White House so he could get his security briefing every day. And this was with the U-2 program and other reconnaissance aircraft. So I went from signal analysis and observation to another level of it with the U-2 spy plane, which is the technology is phenomenal within on both of these aircraft. Just amazing. And then from there, I got stationed in Florida. Now I worked with test and development. And at this point, all the signals that we received from the rivet joint now went into all the fighter aircraft for their countermeasures. So they could have walk-offs. So they know the frequency. What they're doing is duplicating the enemy's frequency and pushing this off to the side. So if a missile comes to them, they think that they're a few hundred yards over here to another area. This is when I started really receiving, I would say, the negative effects from the war. Now, during Korea, we didn't have a family physician, so I went to the ER probably every other week with migraines and just some other issues. At this point, we were required to maintain every single fighter aircraft in the entire world. So we were deployed a lot. And because of that, I would leave and I would get sick and I would have migraines, or I would throw up, or I would be in an enormous amount of pain. And then maybe a few hours later, I was completely fine. And so it was very perplexing to me. And of course, the team that I worked with. So I went to a medical board, and things were different in 99. They just medically discharged me. They gave me 45 days to get out. And it was so shocking to so many of the other people in the squadron because like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'll just go get another job. I mean, I don't have any debt. I have a house payment. Either way, you have to have a house payment, and we always lived just really below our means. I rode a bicycle for basically like 8 years. Even in Florida, I rode a bike to work. In Omaha, I rode a bike almost year round. even during the snow and the ice. I love the outdoors and I love the nature. So my identity was kind of lost at this point. I was still a husband and still a father and a son, but I wasn't electronic warfare anymore. I wasn't in the Air Force. I wasn't an airman anymore. All this is being stripped away. And it was very serendipitous. Of anybody that knows CC's Pizza, and it used to be the all-you-can-eat $2.99 buffet, we walked into a CC's there by Eglin Air Force Base, and we were eating the buffet, and my wife got this Sprite, and she's like, well, this tastes funny. And I went up to the manager, and I said, hey, man, the Sprite tastes funny. And I said, maybe it's your water. And he goes, it's not my water, it's your water. I'm from Texas. And so anybody that knows Texans, like, they breed something in the water for these people. Like, Texas is the best state. Texas is the best of everything. The biggest, the greatest, like nothing can compete with Texas. And from that, I said, well, I don't drink soda. I just drink water. But my wife is telling me it. And an amazing friendship was developed with my buddy of mine, Curtis. And so he knew that I was getting out of the military. He knew that I was kind of lost. He goes, hey, I plan on opening a store. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I'd love for you to be a general manager. And so I went into CC's, and it was one of the things that I excelled at really well. When I took the ASVAB going into the military, I think I scored a 98. When I took the test at CC's, I scored 100, and they never had anybody score 100. So, it was a great opportunity. I ended up owning the franchise there in Grandview, Missouri, and I had an amazing team. Right behind me there, to my right, is my son, and we had a great time. It was a lot of lessons learned. I will say that when you own a franchise or a small business, it really owns you. And this store owned me completely. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week, and that's a whole nother podcast. But I was in business with another guy. He ended up getting murdered. That's another hour-long discussion. So I left CC's, and I had a variety of different contracts in the IT realm. I worked for the Federal Reserve, I worked for Perceptive Software, and then I worked for USDA. And my buddy Jeff that you saw earlier, eventually I worked with him in cybersecurity, and I did network scanning. So this is just one of the thousands of networks at the USDA. My job was to scan the network, find the vulnerabilities, and provide suggestions and solutions to those vulnerabilities. But it became extremely stressful for me at this time. We were really reactive in a lot of methods, and my health was just deteriorating. I say at this point, I became a shell of a man. I say that I was bankrupt mentally, physically, and spiritually. Although I was making really good money, I had some really good workers. I had a lot of toxic workers as well. And it wasn't a healthy environment for me at any level, at any point, long term. And I revert back to this because this is my wife and I on our first trip to New York back in the 80s. So this is at the World Trade Centers with the Statue of Liberty behind us. And then this is at the Statue of Liberty with the World Trade Centers. And this is why it's so pivotal, because of all the bombing and all those people that we killed is the reason that 9/11 occurred. It was a complete total reaction for what we had done as a country and to disseminate so many innocent lives. And so a lot of times people don't even realize the impact that we're making, and we don't realize the future. This planned attack that somebody had spent years and years planning for vengeance for what had happened to their friends and their family. So my wife came to me one day and she said, "You're not the man you used to be. You're not the man I married." And I'm like, oh my God, she wants a divorce. And I thought that was what was coming. And she goes, "I want you to retire. And I want you to focus on your self-care. I want you to focus on your health and your well-being." So, working for the USDA, I knew what was going to happen. I usually took the bus, but that day I drove because I knew they were going to walk me out the door. So I went in, turned in my resignation, and two big old guys with guns come over and they're like, "Give me your key card, walk away from your computer." And so I hopped in, I went home, and I called the VA. And I said, "Look, I'm not in a good state mentally, physically, and spiritually. I'm unable to work. I'm unable to function." And what I realized is that I turned into my dad. the person that I didn't want to become the most was the person that I became, because I'd spent all these years avoiding the trauma. I spent all these years doing everything that I could to not be myself and not to face the stress, the anxiety, the guilt, and the shame. I was looking for other substances, other mechanisms. And that's really the core behind it. And so I dove into self-care. I went to the VA and they suggested 3 things. Tai Chi is familiar, never done. Yoga, familiar, never done it. I'd heard of these things. And the other one was biofeedback. And to me at that time, it sounded really scary. I was thinking biohazard, biochemicals. I'm thinking about to all the war things, right? And all the chemicals. Mm-hmm. And so I went out to New Jersey, spent a week out there, landed back in Kansas City. And I'll never forget this guy, Dr. Black, kind of like this little hippie guy. And he's like, all right, are you familiar with biofeedback? I'm like, no. And he goes, all right, we're going to sit in this lazy boy and we're going to put all this monitor on you. We're going to test your pulse and your heart rate. We're going to test your oxygen, your blood pressure before and after, blah, 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 whole thing. And you're just going to breathe. And I'm like, what? Yeah, you're just going to breathe. It's okay. And so he put a little box up there and he's like, what kind of music do you like? I'm like, I like nature. And he's like, okay, follow this breath. Inhale for 4, pause and hold for 4, exhale for 4, pause and hold. And so I sat in this chair and my pulse went down like 10 beats. I left the VA hospital more calm and relaxed than I walked in. That's the first time that ever happened. If you talk to any veteran, most of them will tell you they leave the hospital more stressed, more frustrated, more enraged than when they came in.
Yeah.
And I said, this is a very unique experience. So I got home and I was like, what is biofeedback? And I realized it's the Eastern version of mindfulness and meditation. So I dove into mindfulness 100%, of being present, of being in the moment, of setting intention and living by that intention. And that every day I get up and I set an intention, and that's my interaction and my conversation that I have with myself and others. And so I'll give you a few examples. I've got a garden right out here and we grow a variety of veggies, corn and tomatoes and beans and melons. And I realized that my whole entire life, I've never lived intentionally. I never planted the seeds of love or acceptance or unconditional love or acceptance. I was living and planting seeds of fear. I couldn't give love because I never really possessed it. I never really owned it. I never really manifested it for myself. We reap what we sow. And until you plant those seeds and manifest them in your life, it's superficial. You can tell me you love me, but unless you actually own this love, unless you own these carrots or these onions or these things that you've manifested, you can't give it away. And I think that's one of the most pivotal aspects and transformations in my life, is that I begin to offer myself love and forgiveness. And every day I have to get up and still offer myself forgiveness. So I want you to think about this concept as we dive into this, of this meditation and this mindfulness, of that. For example, if today's intention is forgiveness, I would ask myself, what does forgiveness feel like for me and for my community? And what does forgiveness sound like? The tone of my voice, of how I talk to myself, the self-dialogue, the doubt that I can forgive myself for all the guilt and the shame of everything that I've done to myself and others. But what does it sound like as I talk to you today? The tone of my voice, that I can offer forgiveness. And then what does it look like for me to forge forward and become the producer of my life, to become the hero, to become the warrior, and no longer be the victim of the circumstances? And I put myself in that situation, of course, and there's other people that play a role in that. But I want us to really dive into that and think about being present, being in the moment, and being selective and living intentionally. Because what we have done is done the opposite. We're attached to these little electronic devices, and all we're doing is escapism. Every single thing we do is to avoid our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our past, instead of being present, of being in the moment, and allowing ourselves to live intentionally. So I dove into these concepts, and one of my favorites is turning the conflict into intimacy, of how we can create emotional and intellectual intimacy with ourselves and our community each and every day, how we can become completely, totally vulnerable raw, authentic, and real. So many people see vulnerability as a weakness, but vulnerability is your greatest strength. When you get up every morning and you begin to realize what it is you need, what you want, what you desire, what your dreams, your visions, your goals are, and you begin to live in that mode and that intentionally, it's gonna give you that segue to your mission statement. I'll say this about mission statements and what I've been leading for like the last 9 years. Do you know that every mission statement has been something positive for themselves and their community? That nobody is like, I want to go out and be a mass murderer. I want to go out and create conflict and havoc in everybody's life. Not one person has written any negative context with their mission statement. So at our core, we're good people. At our core, we want to give to ourselves and others, but we haven't been given the tools and the modalities. All we've been giving is the opposite in our life.
Wow. You know, I just have to stop you here, Kerry, because, you know, I've never heard your complete story like this. And it's funny, everything that you have been talking about, like the universe, God, whatever you believe in, has been leading up to this moment. You and I've had a couple conversations over the last couple of weeks, so you know what's going on within my sphere here. And so when you said, you know, turn conflict into intimacy, I'm thinking, what the hell does that even really mean? So thank you for sharing that, because
well,
you know, you can be vulnerable to a point.
Yeah, it's the internal conflict. You have internal conflict that you have created yourself. Mm-hmm. And some of it is, of course, external, from the relationships personally and professionally. Mm-hmm. But until you can resolve that internal conflict, you're not going to be able to resolve it externally. Until you love yourself internally, you can't love externally. And so we really have got to dive in and begin to live more intentionally, more meaningful, more purposeful in all aspects of our life. And then healthy boundaries is another one of the number one keys, right? That it's okay to say no. It's okay to say yes. It's okay to serve yourself, right? And what you need. Some people are going to get their feelings hurt when you begin to establish healthy boundaries and you tell them no, because they've been used to taking advantage of you. But you have to redirect them back to your true, authentic self, of who you are, of what your intention is. And like, if I go down this path, then it's going to be hurtful and harmful. Once you establish your mission statement, it gives you the direction every single day of where you want to go. That's why with my clients, that's the first thing we do is our mission statement. Because if they come to me and they ask me, should I do this job or that job? I say, what is your mission statement? What serves you the most? What about this relationship? What about this? Every decision now is based upon your mission statement. If it doesn't serve your mission statement, if it's not intentionally, you don't do it. It makes it so black and white. It takes all the guessing out of our life. But the thing is, we've never established and understand the value of a mission statement. I'll say it real briefly, and then we can dive into any of these concepts later. The overall concept of your mission statement is how you want to feel and how you want others to feel. Dorothy, how do you want me to feel during this interaction and conversation? Ryan, how do you want me to feel during this interaction and conversation? That's the core concept of your mission statement. And then when you wrap an intention around that, then it gives you this amazing, bountiful life and purposeful life that you've never experienced before. It's so simple. It's the most simplest complex concept, but we make everything in our life so complex. And then what this has resulted is me living out my blissful life, that every single day it's full of bliss and full of joy. I've got this dog that's slowly dying of cancer. You know, we discovered this a year ago, and we went to go have it removed, and they're like, there's no way, there's fingers all inside, right? And this dog came into my life at the same time my wife asked me to retire. And so he's been with me. He's been my protector. He's seen the true transformation at me at my worst to me at my best. And that's all he's known. But this dog has been loving, accepting of me, and protecting of me for the last 11 years. And then there's some days when it's really, really difficult for him. It's difficult for him to get out of bed, or it's difficult for him to get off the couch, or his legs come out from underneath him and he just really struggles. And there's days that I just cry and I have so much grief and so much sorrow. And what I realize is the second I try to turn off those emotions is the second that I don't feel the joy. And so many times in our life, we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. We've turned off emotions. You can't selectively choose which emotions to numb. When I begin to feel sorrow for my dog and I'm like, I don't want to feel sorrow. I don't want to feel sadness. I don't want to feel these things. Then at the same time, I begin to realize I don't feel the joy that he gives me because I've turned it off. So allowing yourself to find your bliss is all this encompassing as one, is living your blissful life, and it incorporates the healthy boundaries, the turning conflict into intimacy, the sleep, the exercise, all these concepts that I talked about, mindfulness, meditation, and self-care. All this creates your blissful life and your heaven on earth. This is a photo that I took of my family. So over here, if you're looking at the screen to the right, it's my son-in-law, our oldest daughter, our youngest daughter, then our granddaughter, then my wife, our son, then me, and then our two grandsons. And then you can see the dogs in there. And now we have acquired all 4 of those dogs from my kids. So I told my kids they're not allowed to get a dog, a cat, a gerbil, nothing. Nope, not a fish, because I end up with all of them, and I become attached to them. So I love this family. I love this photo because it's a true transformation and a true testament of how much you can grow and change. And this is also important too. We had an exchange student, Sarah, and she's just been pivotal in our life as well. We spent a couple of times over in Germany, and that was just such a great experience to see the culture, to understand the culture. And we've been all over the world and visited a lot of places, and Germany is definitely by far one of the favorite. This is taken a few years ago. This is a family reunion we have in Woodward, Oklahoma. So our roots are still there, grounded there for now. But the extent of my family and my friends, it's all the relationships are valuable to me at some level at some point. This is the first yoga session that I taught at Warriors Ascent 9 years ago. And this is when I really began to connect with other veterans, other essential personnel, and first responders. I always introduce myself as Kerry Steuart, a Gulf War veteran. And in this space, you're accepted and loved for who you are. And I love and accept you for who you are. And it's very serendipitous because a lot of these men will tell me I'm the only grown man that's ever told them that I love them. Not even their father has told them that they love them. So I think it's important that we begin to understand the context of love, and that we begin to share love, and we begin to fill our heart full of that and give that to the community. My focus is truly on saving and transforming lives. I created a nonprofit 8 years ago. This is our grand opening in Kansas City. The mayor was there. We had a lot of people that came in. It was an amazing community. And because of the money generated from the nonprofit, I was able to give back so much more to the veterans, essential personnel, and first responders. It was a huge blessing. I got to work with Manduka, Susan G. Komen of Project Ohm. I got to lead a yoga class out at the Kansas City Royals session. And that was really, really just a huge blessing to be surrounded by a bunch of people that want to give back and care. Now I lead retreats here, and I'm going to lead them throughout the United States. And I call it Finding Your Bliss. I have dialed in and figured out the modalities, the questions to ask, so people can finally get their bliss and live out their blissful life and let go of the trauma, let go of the guilt, let go of the shame. This is at the 190th. So I also have opportunities with the 190 Air National Guard. There's a shift now in the military and the Department of Corrections of becoming more mindful, becoming more present of these holistic modalities that actually work. They're integrating these now. And so I'm very proud of the United States of where they're going with all these programs. I was blessed to get Nonprofit of the Year for Grove last year. And this is just a little data from our social impact from last year. So we had about 1,000 people. With Department of Correction, we had about 120. Air National Guard, it was over 100. I just kind of counted in that photo that one time. And then Warriors Ascent, we had 64 attendees. So last year, I contributed 540 hours. I had about 1,100 students, and these were the other people that help make contributions as well. And this is an anonymous survey that I send out every year. So if you've gone through my sessions or you've gone through any of my workshops, you're going to receive opportunity to complete this every year. A 30% increase in sleep, a 47% reduction in anxiety, about a 50% stronger professional relationships, a 51% decrease in stress levels, a 56% increase in conflict resolution, about almost a 90% increase in self-care practices, and over 100% boost in stress reduction and techniques. If this will go to the last slide, maybe it's not. This is some of the feedback that I've got. So I got a huge win yesterday. I'm free of that darkness, free of a very dark memory, and I have a clear understanding of what was happening and what I was experiencing. If I had not followed your path, I would be in a coffin. I believe in this program. This is a little bit longer. These are a little bit longer. We won't go through this, but this, I like this one. Where do I begin? You've transformed every aspect of my life. You have given me the opportunity to be the real, authentic, raw ability to be vulnerable. I wouldn't be here without you. You truly have a real life superhero, and you have guided us to the top of the mountain and haven't left our side. You're amazing and a lifelong friend. There aren't enough words or what you have and continue to do for not only myself, but everyone you come in contact with. You don't judge, you don't question how or why we just got here, but we were. You just fill the room full of love and appreciation. For that, I say thank you. I love you, brother. And, there's more of them. I want to redirect us back to that initial slide. And I just want you to know, and anybody that's ever watching this, that you matter to me. I want you to know that your life has immense value, and you matter to me more than words can express. I care about you deeply and believe in you. You are not alone in this journey, and I'm here to support you through everything. Your presence in my life is a gift, and I want to spend time with you, sharing moments and overcoming challenges together. Please, let's find the help and support we need to get through this together, because your happiness and well-being means everything to me. So that is the end of my little presentation.
Wow, Kerry. I just, before we get to Ryan's questions here, I just want to give shout out to Rena. She's been following your story here the last 30 some odd minutes here. And she has a podcast called Better Tell Daddy show. And she was actually the executive producer of the Jerry Springer Show back in the day. So,
oh my God,
wow.
I watched that every day when I was in Florida.
Really?
Yeah.
I watched that when I was growing up. Okay.
Routine. I didn't drink coffee, but all the guys would get around, get their coffee. We'd do our morning debrief, and we would watch the Jerry. And I would look at there, I was like, is this real? I was like, this can't be real. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is real.
So I will connect you after the show, and I'm sure
I'm a fan. I'm just going to tell you I'm a fan. Yeah.
I'm sure
that is so cool.
Might have you on her show.
Not
but I've been on her
show, but yeah.
No, yeah. Unfortunately, Jerry's passed away. So
yeah, he's gone.
Yeah. But she has like I said, another amazing show too. So I'll have to connect you two. And so thanks, Rena, for listening in and coming back and listening to Kerry's story. I've known you for 3 years, and I'm really glad you did it the way that you wanted to, because I said, man, we've never had a presentation on our show before. It's usually just like talking, but that was so impactful, Kerry, like seeing those pictures and seeing, exactly what you went through, especially during the Gulf War. And when you showed that picture where you said it was the job where you had to find the vulnerability. How ironic is that? Finding vulnerabilities within this map of confusion, and now that's what you do.
Yep.
Now you bring out people's vulnerabilities instead of finding the weaknesses. Now and correct me if I'm wrong, but back then you used to find the vulnerability so that you could kill it. But now you're saying, wait a minute, no, let's find the vulnerability so that you can push forward within their lives and enrich their lives. And wow.
Yeah. I think what happens is people view vulnerability as a weakness, that you're fragile, right? That you're not capable. And when we begin to change that perspective and realize that vulnerability is our greatest strength, our greatest asset, and it's really us just being raw, authentic, real, and genuine with ourselves, that I no longer have to hold back. So when I'm vulnerable with you and you're vulnerable with me and we're vulnerable with one another, we don't have to hold back. We're giving each other our all. We've all been in relationships where people aren't giving their all. And we know that there's some ill or dysfunctional, or there's some intention that we can't really dial in. And so when we begin to understand that level of that, I can just be my authentic self And we'll go back to, that one story that person said that I always offer the space of acceptance and unconditional love and non-judgment. What happens when you do that? What happens when you feel loved? What happens when you feel accepted? What happens when you don't feel like you're going to be judged or criticized? You can become vulnerable. This world has set us up with these social comparisons, with all these disconnections, that we don't feel like we can be our real authentic self because we're going to be judged or we're not going to be accepted, right? That's why social media is so insidious. Social media is one of the biggest destructions of our current society, because it's a social comparison consistently of unrealistic expectations of what other people are living. Because I know those people, I know what they're posting. Some of them may see this video, and you're playing a role on this image of you and your family that you act like it's so happy, but you're not. You're some of the most miserable people on this planet, but on the outside, you want everybody to feel like you're happy, but you're not. And that's the part of being vulnerable, is allowing yourself to feel.
Right. 100%. And life, I think, is a journey. Like, we all want to get to that feeling of bliss, but you can't go from like 0 to 100. And
Yeah.
and it's finding that. It's you're right. Like, yeah,
Well,
I can post something on Facebook, but no one really knows really if that's, I put everything that I post is true in that moment, but that doesn't mean that the next moment, like, something happened, right?
Well, I think if you look at, going back to my dad and my mom, they, not to discredit, I think parents, genuinely, most of us do the best we can, but there's something your parents didn't give you. There's some trait, there's some quality they didn't give you. And then you begin to look for that in every relationship. So say it's love or acceptance or trust, and you're not getting it, then you can pervert it. You can become narcissistic. You can become demanding, because you're wanting this so bad. You're desiring this so bad from somebody external, that you're going to do everything you can to get love and acceptance and all these things from them. But what would happen if you gave that to yourself? If you fulfilled your life with everything that you're looking for externally that your parents didn't give you, the trust, the love, the acceptance, then it's a bonus if somebody gives it to you. There's no expectations.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem, is that we look externally way too much for other people in our life to satisfy us and fulfill us. And we need to do it within ourselves internally. That's our role and goal.
Ryan and I are doing a book club with Kerry right now. And I just, so we're on week 8, but there's a couple of things that I've learned in this book club with Kerry, and I was like straight up with him. Kerry said, "Hey, can you do it?" So I showed up, because Kerry has showed up for me over the last 3 years. Anytime I've asked, he's like right there. He's the only guy I know that will call me on my birthday and sing happy birthday to me. And so I know, right? And so when Kerry made a statement, because Kerry's also in Angels 14 with myself and a bunch of us on Fridays. I know I talk about Angels 14 a lot on this show, but it's because I believe in that community so heavily, and I believe that our veterans and first responders need that community and connection. So Kerry had, unbeknownst to Kerry triggered me one Friday, and I said to him in the book club, I'm like, dude, I finally get what you said. And you had said to me that you're paraphrasing, your partner can't be everything to you. Like, you can't get everything you need out of your marriage with one person. And of course, I took it a whole different way. And we never had the conversation, but then I met his amazing wife. Well, I've met Tammy a couple times, but Tammy said, I cannot give Kerry everything that he needs in his life to be 100% complete. And she goes, that's why he has his community, right? And so I messaged him after that, and I was just like, Kerry, if nothing else that I've either learned from the book or anything like that, that has got to be the best thing ever. And saying that, because do I want to be everything for my spouse? No. Do I? At one point in my life, I like marriage. Okay, marriage means that that you get everything from each other, right? But that's not the case.
Mm-mm.
And like you said, our parents do the best that they can. They only learned it from their parents, and God knows, especially with the parents they had, what they're learning, and they're doing the best that they can. But it takes the pressure off, thinking, wait a minute, I don't have to be everything for my spouse,
I don't
right?
know where we got to that mindset. How do we get to that place? And I know I shared it, and I'll share it here again. I don't have the actual numbers, but 50 to 70% of people have an affair, and 30 something percent are going to end up in a divorce. Okay, so you realize that there's different levels of affair, but I'll tell you a couple of the keys is, first of all, in a relationship, is get a mission statement to where both of you are on the same path. Tammy and I developed a mission statement right when we got married. And I think that's one of the things that's helped us. The other thing is being vulnerable. If I get up every morning and I share my wants, my needs, my desires, my dreams, my visions, my goals for me and my wife, she knows them. And if I'm like, hey, my body's really sore, I need a massage, she's going to be like, well, I ain't doing it. Go get a massage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just speaking the truth, right? I don't have time for that. That's not in my bandwidth. But go into town and go get a massage, right? Or I have a headache. Okay, well, go see your acupuncturist. Go make an appointment, right? And this guy the other day, and it's funny, I shared this on book club too. He called and he was complaining about his wife. And I said, yeah, my wife, I can't get her to change the oil in the car. I can't get her to rotate and balance the tires. I can't get her to mow the yard. Like there's all these things I can't get her to do. And he's like, all right, Kerry, I get your point. I think at the level that we just have set up unrealistic expectations of others.
Sorry, I'm in the middle of the hot flash, and I'm thinking of a bunch of different things, and I'm just like, oh my God, Kerry, you're nailing my week and my last 2 weeks right here.
I mean, all you want him to do is show up. Imagine if I offered a space for my wife to be vulnerable. If I offered a space and an environment for my wife and my kids and my community to feel loved, to feel forgiven, to feel accepted. What does that sound like? What does it feel like? And what does it look like? That's what really living intentionally is. If you provide that space personally and professionally, you're going to transform this community. That's all it takes. It's so simple, but you've got to put down that damn phone. You've got to turn off the TV. You've got to do things different in your life than what you're doing. You have to devote time for yourself, and you're going to have to establish healthy boundaries and say no to all these distractions in your life. Fear is the number one distraction, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Ryan, did you have questions?
Yeah. I wrote them down. I'm just reading them. So you're talking about trauma,
right?
And how we all obviously experience trauma and whatnot, and we have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
What has trauma taught you about yourself? I mean, like going through it and having to deal with the VA and finding Tai Chi, all that stuff. What has it taught you about yourself?
Well, one of the things is my body responds the same, whether it's a bomb, which I've been in a lot of bombing situations, or a bear, which I've encountered those two. Okay. And the reason I use that is because those are real life experiences. My response mechanism is to stop, freeze, analyze, and figure out an escape route.
Sure.
Okay. That's my MO every single time. So what happens is when you're under a lot of duress and a lot of stress for a long period of time, and so we never diminish or demoralize anybody's stress, anxiety, or PTSD. But what we want to do is make sure that's been proven. Now it's even popular to say that I have PTSD when I don't have it. I have these little high school kids and young kids tell me they have PTSD. And I said, from what? And then who diagnosed you? Is this a self-diagnosis? So I think it's imperative this. So I'll say one other thing and then I'll move on with this. If you tell yourself a lie long enough, you tend to believe that lie. And there needs to be evidence of what you believe in. 100%. There has to be evidence. Otherwise, it's just a belief. Okay. So under a lot of stress, under a lot of anxiety, your amygdala becomes enlarged. And then when your amygdala becomes enlarged, you're hypervigilant. You have zero self-control. You have zero self-regulation. So let's just say my stress level's way up here. And you pull over in front of me. My body's reacting a bomb or a bear. And I'm going to go to defend myself, right? It's road rage. Or you do something inconsiderate or rude to me at the grocery store. I'm going to get in your face. My body is reacting. I'm in this defense mechanism all the time because my amygdala has been enlarged. So when I started this journey, 11 years ago, there wasn't a lot of data over mindfulness, meditation, yoga, all these concepts. Now there's clinical trials. They don't spend a lot of money because, the pharmaceutical, business would lose their money if they spend it, but it's proven. This is 100% fact, what I'm going to say. Exercise can cure moderate and mild depression, not severe. So if you're depressed, go exercise. That is the cure. Get your butt off the couch. Get your butt off that damn phone. Go move. Go do something that finds you joy. So I was way up here. After about 6 months, I started to slow down, and then I would get a trigger and I'd go back up and I'd go back up, because every morning I would get up and I would set my intention and I would engage in mindfulness and meditation. I would take my dog and we would go to a park somewhere in Kansas City, and we would sit down and I would do mindfulness and meditation and focus on my intention. And then I did the same thing in the evening. I seriously spent 3 hours a day. I'm retired. What else do I have to do but focus on myself and make myself a better person? So eventually I was from up here all the time to down here. Then I'd have these spikes. Then eventually I came down here, and I've never seen that again. I've never gone back up to that point again. So realizing that we have the ability to begin to heal and recover, whatever your belief is in God, whoever your God is, like your breath, your mindset, and your focus can do so much for you holistically that you don't need all these prescriptions. You don't need all these avoidance mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would say that's probably the biggest things that I've learned about trauma in myself and with others. I've seen it. I mean, I've seen people that integrate and spend time in self-care every day. Their lives are completely transformed, and they're happy. They're blissful. They're joyful. They've overcome these obstacles because they're not avoiding.
Sure.
They're living up to their full potential. But you have to integrate all of them. It's not just one. I think that's part of the challenge we have in America too. If I said, "Oh, let's get healthy," you're going to be like, probably two things. I don't know, maybe same in Canada. We're going to go exercise and we're going to eat a little different. There's so much more to a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah,
you've
the
got
holistic part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to get your sleep right. And when you're eating right, it's really truly getting rid of so much other stuff. And it's having healthy boundaries and having healthy relationships. And it's turning all the conflict into intimacy. Like there's all these concepts to it. So I think understanding what causes the trauma and what you can do to really eliminate it. I don't think people understand it. I think they believe that they've got to take this other substance to heal the trauma. And that's just putting a Band-Aid. That's another avoidance mechanism, because so many of these veterans, and you've seen this, they take a pill because they can't sleep. And then they got to take a pill because they can't wake up. And now they're taking this other pill, and now they've got a stomach ache. So now they're taking one for their stomach. And now they're so tired all the time they can't exercise. And now they're in zombie land. So now they got to take something to get them out of zombie land. And now they got to take more of everything because, it tends to deteriorate and not have the same effect.
One thought that came to mind was you can do the sleep, and for example, with me, like you're doing this, you're trying to sleep better, and you may have, you're exercising, whatever, and then maybe you're not necessarily dealing with your trauma. The sleep is affected and everything else gets affected. So I think, you're talking about the whole holistic part of it. You're only going to be able to affect yourself positively if there's, you're looking at it, all of the ideas.
Yep, the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
You have any other questions?
Yeah, I have one more question, and then I need to honestly get going. But yeah, well, with the last question, so you're talking about, I'm trying to put two different ideas together, so hopefully it kind of comes together. But you were talking about now you live your bliss because you've
Yeah.
kind of figured that out. But you were talking earlier about that you are now you work to living below your means. So I was kind of curious, how has living below your means led you to living your bliss in that philosophy?
Yeah, I think being poor and being like Oklahomans, you know, in the 80s, we were all poor, 70s and 80s, but we didn't know we were poor because everybody was poor, right?
Sure.
And you look at the statistics of Oklahoma, and it's high on all the bad stuff and low on all the good stuff. Obesity is high, divorce is high, you know, schools, you know, they all got like C's and D ratings, right? And so like happiness is very low, right? So all those things. So I think like when you get money, a lot of times, like, yeah, I spent frivolously on some aspects, but longevity, I knew what I wanted. So like, you know, I don't remember the year, but it's quite a few years ago, we paid cash for a house, and then we didn't have car payments. Just like in the military, you know, we pay cash for our cars. I rode a bike, and we just had a house payment. And I've always kind of followed that philosophy. So like my kids don't have car payments. They have house payments. They graduated from college. They don't have debt. They don't have a school. You know, we paid for their college or whatever it is that they want. We pay for their education, right? So I think we changed that gene code in there of like, hey, you can have an education, right? Because people tell me all the time, I'll always have a house payment, I'll always have a car payment, I'll always have student loans, I'll always. I said, that's a choice you make.
Yeah.
You have to make some adjustments. So I think like starting off, and I could go into this a little bit longer, but if you think about the philosophy, if you pay cash for a decent car, so like I think like in 2000, I spent like $6,000 on a car. Well, that $6,000 25 years ago is going to last you a long time, right?
Sure.
And then what you do is you put that money in savings, and then when that car goes out, then you can buy a $10,000 car. And when that car goes out, you can buy a $20,000. Now, how long is a $30,000 car and a 40? You see what I mean? That concept. But here's the thing about like if you don't have debt, if you don't have a house payment, you don't have a car payment. I'm not tied to a location, Ryan. So this house is paid for.
Sure.
If I'm going to get up and leave and go to Mexico for a year, I can go to Mexico or Cancun, or I can go travel because I don't have to worry. I'm not working for this.
Sure.
This is not my this is not my identity. This house is not this is not what I'm working for. Okay. So when you don't have that debt, then you have all the freedom in the world to choose what you want to do and who you want to become. And I think that's one of the biggest pivotal points is that we had to work hard to get to that point. I'm not denying that it wasn't a lot of conceded effort to do that. And that took a lot of energy and a lot of effort. But once you get to that point, then you just keep moving forward. But if you don't have a house payment, you're not tied to that location. I can rent this place. I can sell this place. I can go somewhere else. And I can use the income from this to live in the other place if I want to rent it. It gives me options. Or I'm not used to making a house payment or a rent payment. Now I can start making that adjustment at my new location because I don't have another one there. It gives you full freedom of your life completely and totally. So the sooner you can pay off your house, the sooner that you can really live out another blissful life because you're not constrained. You feel free.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you guys. This has been an amazing episode. I'm not sure who SM Ozen is, but they also joined us as well. So thank you. Thank you to everybody that is watching this live and on the replay and out in Roku land. Definitely subscribe to our channel, and really thank you, Ryan and Kerry, for being here tonight. Kerry, where's the best place people can reach you at?
Livebliss.org. All my information's on there. So you can email me, you can text me, you can call me. And I'd love to hear from anybody and everybody at some point. So yeah, livebliss.org.
Thank you so much. Is there any last words you have before we wrap this up?
I mean, I could talk a lot. I hope that this was meaningful and impactful to people. I hope that they begin to live out their blissful life and they really begin to live intentionally. And I want you to think about the impact of living intentionally and the substance of what that could mean for our community, that we can really begin to transform and change our entire life and deduct trauma at a young age. and get rid of the suicides and eliminate so much of these things that are occurring by just changing our life. So thank you guys. I love you guys. I appreciate everybody that's watched this now and in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much,
It's good.
guys.
It's good to learn a little more about your story, even though we've talked a lot. So,
yep, you're welcome. You guys take care. I'll see you guys soon.
Right.
I'll see you Tuesday.
All right. See ya.
yeah.
Bye.